My name is Trevor Gorman. I'm 48 years old. I'm from Coquitlam, British Columbia. I've been landscaping since I was 20. My company is Gorman Landscapes, and I am a hardscaper.
What's happening, hardscapers? This is episode 294 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And on today's episode, we have another I Am a Hardscaper episode where we bring on a hardscape business owner and do a deep dive into their business. And today we're joined by Trevor from Gorman Landscapes. Trevor and I have talked quite a bit recently, and I knew he would be an excellent guest to have on the show to talk about his experience in the industry and where he is today, and especially starting up Gorman Landscapes. But before we get into today's podcast episode, we want to thank our sponsors, Cycle CPA. And if you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. Knowledge Tree Consulting, if you are looking for somebody to help you in your business, I would highly recommend Knowledge Tree Consulting. They are efficiency consultants in our industry, and you've heard them on the podcast multiple times before. George and Peter of Oriole Landscaping, and George a couple of other times talking about various topics, and we'll definitely have George on in the future to talk more. But you can learn more about them at knowledgetreeconsulting.com. And thank you to Mosier for jumping on board to sponsor the How to Hardscape podcast. I just got my hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, and I'll be using it to measure, draw, calculate areas, perimeters, volume, elevations, and lay out the entire project on my device and for estimating and design process. If you want to get your hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, use the promo code X8Hardscape. That's X, the number 8 Hardscape at Mosier.com, or simply click the link in the show notes. Now back to our episode. And if you're looking for a software to dive into this season, check out the How to Hardscape headquarters, which will help you budget, estimate job costs, time track, schedule, manage your employees, assign them courses for training and onboarding purposes, and so much more. Send me a message at How to Hardscape if you want to learn more about that, or go to hthheadquarters.com. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Trevor, let's get to know a little bit more about you, yourself, how you got started in the industry, what brought you to now. Take this wherever you want it, start wherever you want, end wherever you want, but let's get to know a little bit more about you.
Cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I feel like a bit of an old guy in the industry. I still feel young enough at heart, though, here, and I've been a few places. Yeah, I guess, you know what, I got into this when I quit my job at 19 in the restaurant industry. A friend of mine asked me if I wanted to mow lawns for the summer. And so I thought that sounds like a lot better way to get a tan and maybe make some better money. So shout out to Scott Curry and Ron at Contour Landscaping back in the day. But worked as a crew chief at that company and various companies in the strata commercial maintenance industry. Probably about 4 or 5 years. Gained a ton of experience on the tools. Grew my plant knowledge. Still impresses my my partner, my girlfriend, to this day. She thinks I'm just making up these names of plants that we see out there in the world, but that's where I started. Learned how to run staff and manage crews there, I guess. But like I say, I was just really in it for the tan. And about 25, I left and started my first business.
Gotcha.
That was Maple Glade Landscaping. Took me way longer than I needed to come up with that name. But yeah, we serviced residential market, you know, doing the mowing lawns, trimming hedges, weeding, all that kind of stuff. And turned out to be an absolute failure, as a lot of people's first businesses, from a profitability stance, just, you know, young, dumb, and broke. But thought I'd give it a crack. So I did learn one important lesson, I think. Just because you know how to do a job or have a process, it does not make you ready to be a business owner.
Going back to your 5 years of experience of managing people and in that lawn side of things, what were you able to like pick away from learning points as you know, managing people or just business operations that you were kind of able to carry forward into Maple Glade?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I transitioned directly into trying to replicate those services that I had seen done, I'm going to call it commercially, but in the residential market, right? So things that made what I perceived as to be a real, true professional company out there doing these services, could we replicate that in the residential market? And that was what was going to let me succeed. And so really, I mean, bringing on some staff, they were young, they were my friends, they were people I knew. So super reliable. But I think just figuring out how to convey what I needed to see done on these spaces, on these sites residentially, to people who weren't in the industry and weren't in the business. So I guess I confronted my first challenges of going, I know what I'm doing. How do I show you what we need to do as a business?
Going back to that time when you were younger, were did you think you were, or looking back on it, were you a good communicator in that, or was something that you had to, like a muscle you had to work on and get stronger and stronger at?
Absolutely. I think to this day I'm still working on that muscle. You know what I mean? I've not been afraid of having a voice, that's for sure. But I think what I was doing back then was just putting my own perceptions of how the job should be done and how I would do it. And it doesn't always work for balancing those same needs with staff and different personality types. So yeah, still to this day, I think I've learned a lot about from my failures on being a communicator and having to give everybody an opportunity to understand what's the goal here? What's the goal of the company? What do I want? What do the customers want? And so I learned a lot back then and still working on it today.
And I asked that as well as my follow-up question to that, because we have got to know each other a little bit and have hopped on these Zoom calls a little bit. And uh, you are a very good talker, a very good communicator. And in terms of sales, as you know, owning and operating your own business, you're a salesperson, selling your own company. Was that also something that came with that communication as a muscle you had to flex, or was that something that you were kind of like from the start gifted with, and you knew that you were good at that?
Yeah, no, that's I'd say it's a very poignant question for this point in my life. Until I started this business, Gorman Landscapes, I actually didn't realize that I was had an acumen for sales. I didn't understand what that meant. I thought it was the underbelly, the used car salesman trying to talk you into the lemon. These were the perceptions that I had of sales. And even though I could talk, I guess I didn't realize I was already developing what my sales approach was, my sales strategy was. I didn't really realize that the primary driver, what I was doing was selling and getting people to like me and hearing what their needs are and just intuitively meeting those needs. But it's only with Gorman Landscapes that I kind of put that together in a sales approach and a sales strategy and realize, oh wow, this is what a lot of people who are pretty high functioning in sales and maybe made their career of sales have been striving to do. And I've just, in a very disorganized way, been doing this my whole life. And so I'm trying to organize that now and just leverage what comes to me naturally and putting that into some systems that our business can benefit from.
Doing so, is that so that you can bring on another salesperson, or is that to organize, or both, organize your thoughts and refine that sales process?
Yeah, I think refining it for sure, just so that I can double check myself. That's my main priority right now. It's I don't want to be having a lot of wasted time in the sales process. I don't think it brings good value to me for valuing my time in it. And it also I don't want to give the client more than they need when they're ready to buy, let's say. So I think really refining that right now is important to me. If I bring it into a system, it does make it teachable and scalable. As for bringing on a sales staff in the future, I think, of course, it's tied to me scaling my business. My gut feeling tells me sales is what I still want to be doing, and I picture myself doing that when I'm a 75-year-old man, and maybe I've got a nice young human who's wanted to sort of buy me out and just agree to keep paying me 100K a year to talk to the clients who've been working for us for decades and convince them to spend more money. So I like that. I really like the sales, and I think I'll continue to do that myself as much as possible.
I want to go back to now, Maple Glade Landscaping. This is a business that you started, right?
Yeah, very small, very young. I mean, 21, 22 years old, and just I don't want to work for somebody. It was my first realization I don't want to be an employee.
And then where does that take you before, starting Gorman?
Yeah, so I think it was honestly my first realization that like I need to learn more about business if I'm going to do this again. And I hopped out of that pretty quickly, about a year. Lasted a year, realized it wasn't doing well. My father had some advice for me. that you can't keep giving me money to help support this business. And so maybe I should get a job. And I did get a job. And, net, I went back into the industry now, starting to work for some companies. And that's where I started to experience my first installation side of the business.
Hmm.
Work for a company, shout out to Canadian Lawn Care. Pretty big player, has got three different divisions out here on the West Coast, everything from excavation and site prep to commercial install to a maintenance division. And I was a young man, and I think that's where I learned a lot of my processes about how to get work done on a large production scale. It's where I got into using the equipment for the first time, the bobcats, the excavators, organizing B trains of hardscape product to show up on site that are going to take weeks to install and dump truck after dump truck. And it's just, got thrown into that fire as a foreman who kind of had no business being a foreman in that space. And they just wanted to see where I landed in that.
How did you do? Was this something that you also needed to like a muscle work on and become that foreman that they expected you to be, or what was that process like?
Yeah, no, 100%. I viewed when I started it, I can remember it very clearly being extremely nervous to go in there, realizing I had a lot to learn, knowing that people who were, 5 and 10 years my junior probably knew a lot more about this space than I did. And so really I just stepped in with, being a good communicator probably helped. Being willing to take on a task and take that risk helped. And to be honest, I came on as a crew member, and within the first 2 weeks, the site super fired the foreman right in front of me and said, "You have his job now." And yeah, yeah. And he ended up working for under me for the next year. And, I worked with that crew. And so that's where in about 18 months, I learned how to lay paving stones for the first time, how to do Allen block retaining walls for the first time, how to work on a development on the side of a mountain, which is, you know, a lot of the lower mainland, British Columbia, and how to retain and separate those elevations, a lot about structural landscape. And so I'd say it was definitely just hopped into the fire and came out the other side with a lot of new skill sets.
And then you start Gorman after a certain amount of time there?
Yeah, no, you're going to have to go through a good 10 years of me working for some other companies in the commercial installation space. Started a second company in that time, Curb Appeal Landscapes, which was basically a subcontractor of hardscape to most of these gentlemen that I had worked for before. And where I net finished off was I got back into a employer when we started having kids, and I wanted some stability. And that's where shout out to a couple landscape companies, Houston Landscape out here on the beautiful North Shore. And I think them alone gave me the most current vision of what I wanted my landscape company to look like.
Okay, so what was that vision? What were the aspects that you were able to pull from them to then start Gorman?
Yeah, so Houston Landscapes, and they're still operating today. They were the first company that number one serviced the residential market in a highly professionalized and organized manner. Two partners on the company, a lot of onus and freedom of creation on the leadership, the foreman or managers on those sites. First time I was working with landscape architects in the residential space, so bringing in known landscape architects that gave a little bit of panache to their designs. So really up the level of design that I was exposed to and craftsmanship. And it was the first time I was working on residential sites that were punching up 50 to $100,000 projects, right? And I saw clients just eating it up. They loved it. They wanted it. And also realizing there is different levels of clients spend as well too. So it helped me kind of level my game up going, oh, if I want to do the big work, you've got to find the clients who already have that budget, have an intention to spend, and how do we capture them? So I think it was a huge eye opener and really painted the picture for me.
With all your experience, looking back at all the different companies that you worked for, and we've already talked about things that you were able to kind of pull from and in starting Gorman, what were some things that you definitely did not want to adopt from those previous companies? Is there anything that stands out that they, comes to mind that you definitely don't want that in your business, basically?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of it was, well, personally, it made me know for sure that I didn't want to work in the crowded, literally crowded commercial installation space. That time at Canadian Lawn Care, it was just a constant fight every day, work over other trades, deadlines. Like I say, you've got to find empty spaces just for dump trucks to dump their stuff because it was messy and panicked and furious pace, and I didn't really find it very valuable to me as a person. And with just a production schedule, so it definitely let me know I didn't really desire to work into the commercial space. And I think also as a manager, I realized that I had even though I tolerated it, being exposed to let's call it the alpha male aspect of the construction industry in general. I tolerated it. I was exposed to it. In my generation, it was normal, but I knew that it wasn't a huge value to me, and it wasn't something I took pride in. I didn't take pride in these men barking at each other constantly, and I knew that there was a better way to do that. And so I find with my staff, I'm taking much more of a mentorship model in speaking to them, helping them navigate their problems, even the way I try to express my own frustration. So those were a few things. We just tone it down a little bit, be a little more thoughtful and intentional about the way we work with people and in our space.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank Moser for sponsoring. I just got my hands on a Moser 2 Pro and we'll be using this a lot this year for our estimating and design process. It is a measure and capture device that will measure, draw, calculate areas, perimeters, volume, elevations, and lay out the entire project on our device. I'm going to be bringing it on every consultation to measure the dimensions and elevation of the entire project, export it to my design software, and have a working terrain map to begin my designs from, as well as to become more accurate in my quoting process. The Moser 2 Pro is going to save me a ton of time and from having to make rough hand notes while taking these measurements in the field. Instead, Moser does all of that for me. If you want to get your hands on a Moser 2 Pro, use the promo code X8Hardscape. That's X, the number 8 Hardscape at Moser.com, or simply click the link in the show notes. Now back to our episode. Through everything you've talked about, it seemed like there are several jumping off points to get out of the industry, where you had enough of it. I'm going to actually just go work in another industry and pursue a different career. Why stick with landscaping?
Yeah, I don't, I think it wasn't intentional to stick with landscaping, but you go with what you know. That is for sure. We're all just creatures of comfort ultimately. And if we understand and we can only occupy value in this space, like anecdotally, I had really decided that I was going to move out of the industry and I thought I knew a bit about sales. So I went to work for, let's just say, a telecom company. Ipso facto, it was a door-to-door type position. Commission could be great. Of course, they market this, you're going to be great at this. And sure, it was fine, but it made me out of a comfort end up seeking out a job back in the landscape industry. Like I was, staring down the barrel of commission, which seemed inconsistent to me, and I didn't really know where my feet were underneath me in that space. But I knew just waiting for me with one email or a couple phone calls, I could probably hop back in a company truck, be in a foreman position, have benefits, be building projects that I knew how to build. So yeah, I think it was just always going back to the space that was comfortable. And every time I did come back into that space, I think I took something else away that I wanted to change about my experience going forward.
That makes a lot of sense. So I want to go now back to Houston Landscaping or
Yeah.
Landscapes. When you worked for them, did they provide you with like a career path at all? Or this is what your future could look at the business, anything like that you could kind of like aspire to or set goals towards? Or did they meet with you to ask you about your goals or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I think they did. They were the first company that operated quite differently from the ones I had been exposed to. And if I was to put a button on it, I think they really valued your contribution and they definitely valued your input, if not literally relied on it, because neither of the owners were landscapers. One was already, very good business acumen and wasn't his first business. But I remember it's the first time we sat down for Monday morning meetings with the foreman, right? Open table for contributions as to what's going well on your sites, what's not. Here's some things we're thinking of doing as a company. What do all our leadership guys here out in the field think of that? Doing some fun like community engagement. First company I've ever worked for who talked about profit sharing. So all these things were new to me. And I suppose, sure, it did make me feel valued. And I thought there was some value in creating a business one day that would also do that for others.
And then you start Gorman Landscapes. It at What are you doing to drive business in immediately as you start to do it? Did you have previous clients from other businesses you started or worked for at any point in time that you could reach out to? What did you do to start driving, those initial leads to get you going?
So I started it, I want to say, right around COVID. Actually, I was working for the North Vancouver School District. That's where I ended my term of employment with anybody. I had actually worked at the end of my career there for the North Van School District as a grounds person. Just wanted the weekends off, wanted stat holidays, wanted to raise my family. And so I left them on a 6 month unpaid leave of absence because I didn't see a career path there. I was uninspiring, and so I started out from nothing. I was literally, well, not nothing because I had a reputation. My friends, my family, they had known that I was a landscaper, but I was really just cold calling friends, family, people in my community. I was a soccer coach previously, reached out to like the parents list. Hey, how can we help you? Without trying to feel really sleazy about it. So grabbed onto a few projects that helped us get a foothold. I was hiring 17-year-old hockey players who were able to work part-time just as a labor pool. And net after 6 months, I had realized we'd put together, I don't know, probably 100, 150 grand in revenue from just nothing. And it was enough for me to know if I really put my time to this and if I really recruited some extra resources, I think we could probably make a go of it. And so then I quit my job in November of 2021 at the school district and started Gorman Landscapes full time.
If for whatever reason it wasn't going to work out with Gorman, you always had that kind of option there to just return. So it's like no risk situation essentially.
Yeah, there was a safety net for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely a safety net. I mean, I had a partner who was in a strong financial position as well, too. Always makes you feel a little better if you were the breadwinner in the family. I mean, it's the thing about taking a risk on a business, and I think there's different levels in which you can perceive that. If you just watch Instagram all the time, you'd be like, I got to risk it all. I got to leave it on the line. If I have a return plan, I'm never going to succeed in my business. And I would say, like, sort of. You know, like you probably should have some things in place, right? Have some capital to start that business, have a network that could support you if everything went so sideways. Or in my case, I did have a perfectly good job, arguably a career that I could step back into, if it didn't work. So it certainly allowed me, in my 40s to be able to make that jump.
I've always been a fan of people having a safety net, so to speak, or a plan B. I know a lot of people say that it sometimes it's better to just burn all boats and just go all in on one thing. But with 50% of businesses failing in 5 years, you got a 50-50 chance. Might as well have something there. And it allows you to take more risk, in my opinion, if you feel like there's something there for you at the back end.
Yeah, I think so. I think it certainly comes with age as well too. I mean, I look back and I mean, how many times did I sort of burn the boats? I thought I did, but I ended up on my feet, and I've always said like it's fine if you just had to end up being a ditch digger when you're 21, 22. You could do that. Your back could do that. You could handle just I got to go out and make enough money to pay the rent. But as you get older, those consequences get a little more serious, and as you get a family, and so I don't think I would have been able to make that decision without having that safety net. I mean, I have two kids. Yeah, so it turned out well. It was a calculated risk, and long story short, I've never once looked back with regret about making that decision, even though I could be retiring in 15 years with a pension. But I don't think that pension's all it's cracked up to be, and I think I would have sacrificed 15 of my best years of my life in what I perceive to be wasting away in something very unchallenging.
Calculated risk. I'm glad that you said that as opposed to me saying just risk.
Yeah.
Because that's very important. And you took that calculated risk. I mean, you measured the pension and quality of life, I'm sure, and your own family, and you took that risk there. You specifically do install work at Gorman, but in the past you did maintenance, you did other things at other companies, recurring sort of service
Yes.
work. What was the decision to not have some sort of division or even having a launch off point of having some sort of recurring work and just go all install?
I felt starting this business, it was very important for me to choose a pathway as the prime service I was going to develop, and it was going to either be maintenance or installation. Some of the upsides of maintenance to me, which was obvious, I think it would have been easier to start. The training curve for staff is a lot shorter. I think you can recruit those staff and have a low labor cost, low skill cost. I think that your recurring revenue is amazing, right? That's great. You can kind of plan your year out, your total value of contracts divided over your cost of doing business, and now you could really make a budget. The downside for me was I felt in a way, unless you played that game at a high level and did high volume, it felt to me like sort of trying to collect enough pop cans in a day to, pay my bills. Meaning it's a lot of work collecting pennies and dollars. And I don't mean to diminish those because there's a lot of great maintenance companies. I mean, some of the most successful companies in our industry are maintenance services. But for me, it felt like, yeah, a lot of work and had to really build a volume-based business. And I didn't know that's what I wanted to do. Whereas on the hardscape side, the installation side, I immediately saw higher value in there. So the products that we were going to supply to people, the visions we were going to help create, the projects we were going to build, they come with a higher price tag. I have to sell less of those. I have to sell less man hours to achieve bigger margins. And also, it allowed me to be creative. I knew that could go in many different directions. I didn't know if I was a designer. Like I said, I didn't know if I was a salesperson, but I did know that every single month or week or day, I was going to be working on a project that looked different from the last one, and that was exciting to me.
We mentioned how you got the business going in terms of leads today. Where are you getting most of your leads from? How are they coming into your business?
100%, I wouldn't be here without the Facebook communities in my own space, my own area. I didn't know what I was doing so far as marketing. I hadn't ever looked into it or researched it. I mean, I knew, in a sense, what other people were doing, quote unquote, but we just started engaging in those communities directly. My community is Burke Mountain. Okay, it's very North Coquitlam, so one of the newer developments up on the hill, like building into the wilderness, right? And so a lot of these homes are of a certain age, and they're experiencing a lot of infrastructure failures after 11 years, that 15-year mark. And so I didn't know that going into it, but I've been very blessed to be in those communities. I started to see and just respond to the people who were asking for services that we do. By year two, I started to see my clients mentioning my name for new people who were looking for those similar services. I was still reaching out quite a bit in all I knew how to do, which is like chime in there. I know I can't sell in these communities, but I can go, hi, Susan. I am Trevor with Gorman Landscapes. I'm happy that John recommended us. We'd be happy to reach out to you. It was like it's direct marketing. Just in my own local community for someone who presumably has an intention to spend. So I'd still say to this day, and now in our going into our fourth season, we've seen people mentioning our names in abundance. And so someone said to me once, they're like, for your first few years in business, you work for your name, and then hopefully at some point your name starts working for you.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that really hit as something real from last year because so many of my clients coming to me were like, I found you in the Port Mooney Facebook community. I found you in Burke Mountain Facebook community. Many people have recommended to you. I've had people saying to me, which is just wild, Mike, and in my second and third year business, they're like, you're the guy on Burke Mountain, apparently. And I'm like, am I? Am I? That feels amazing to hear. I'll try to be. And so that's been huge for us.
Community Facebook groups was a big thing for you. And I've heard other people talk about that. It's amazing what, just being active in your community can do for your business. And not to mention being online, you can do that from anywhere. And having to do it in person is great to get back to the community, but just at the fingertips, it's very easy to be active in our local communities.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And to put a button on that, I think last year, because I do want to tell you, we did dip into the paid marketing sphere last year. But to put a button on the Facebook aspect is I don't want to let that go. And so I've currently got like a person who I'm, calling. There's a little social media management budget that's happening there with Gorman Landscapes, and they have a certain allotted amount of hours a year to make sure we're still posting in those small business Sundays, small business Fridays, still perusing those community groups to see either who's looking for landscapers or who's mentioning my name, and at least thank the people who are mentioning my name, reach out to the person who inquired in the first place and so that we're active in there. So we're still keeping that presence, and I think we always will. But we did go into some paid marketing last year, which was a whole new adventure.
I want to ask you about paid marketing. I just want to say I have in our local Facebook community groups, there's a lot of people, right? Toronto based. There's
Yeah.
going to be tons of people. So there's a lot of noise and they won't allow businesses to post in there except like on like a Sunday, like you were saying, or for a certain period of time or anything like that. But you can also just post like a beautiful backyard that you've done, not in as your Facebook business page and just say, look at this awesome backyard with this gas fire feature. And then people will comment and say, oh, that's awesome. Who did you get this done by? And you can then message them from that and start that conversation. Little kind of hack to get around the not being able to post as a business there.
Yeah, no, you definitely have to be careful and read those administrators' things. It was interesting last year, just unintentionally, the way we were responding to people, as I had mentioned, was, someone asks for a service, someone else recommends me. I come in and just go, here's who I am. Thank you to you, sir. Let me introduce myself to you, and we'd be happy to help you. We actually had that administrator from that group come out and literally make an independent post as an example of how businesses should engage in the community. And they called me out by name, Gorman Landscapes, in a good way, saying every post that they've made, they're not soliciting uninvited because we don't want that. But they are making the press. So I was like, wow, this, little ways that you find they're reinforcing that you must be doing something right, even at the smallest level. It's pretty cool.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. It's crucial to review your financial statements on a monthly basis so you can diagnose areas for improving your business's financial health early before they become significant issues. Too many contractors wait until the end of the year to review their financials as they file taxes, when it's often too late to take action to change the outcome. Cycle CPA not only handles bookkeeping and taxes, but they also ensure that you're armed with financial data on a monthly basis to make key business decisions. They offer benchmarking, cash flow forecasting, and assistance in developing targets for financial metrics. With their team of accountants specialized in the hardscape and landscape industry, they currently work with hundreds of companies in this field. Visit cyclecpa.com and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. Great advice there. And getting into the paid level side of things, what have you found that kind of works for you in terms of that, or was that starting to dive in, taste it a little, and then see where you go from there?
I had realized I felt very vulnerable having these Facebook and community groups being my only source of predictive marketing and revenue, right?
Mhm.
What if that dries up? What if this community dries up? Probably doubtful, but having a single source of leads felt very vulnerable. So I knew I needed to step in the marketing place. I do want to shout out to a company, Reach Local. A gentleman who I used to coach his kids in soccer had been involved in this company. Net, he's like, this is what we do. We usually work with bigger businesses, but I'd be happy to kind of get you on board with some marketing services. And so we went what I'm going to call the traditional route, the big three. We got them for SEM. We got them to help with some of our SEO, and also targeting in Meta platforms. And so they're a big enough company in which they're taking my budget, they're balancing the spend with things that I don't pretend to understand and I don't really need to know, but about purchasing power at the time, at where the market is at, and how many people are looking. And so I just went, you know what? It seems like you guys have this all under wraps. You're experts at that. Long story short, it was a big risk for us in the spend. I didn't feel we had the revenue to support the ask of the marketing company, but I did it anyway and was just really hoping to see some results in the first few months. And I think they probably accounted for a third of our revenue last year, gross revenue, which is a pretty decent start. For me as a measuring stick to go back and work with them, I would say it's a firm yes. I do know, like, I don't think they're doing anything, and not to diminish them, they're excellent, but I don't, there's a lot of people in that space who are doing what they do, and I say this to young business owners who are thinking of getting involved in some paid marketing. Everybody is going after the same piece of pie in the same way. Okay. There's a certain amount of the market that's available for capture. There's a certain amount of costs associated with capturing that market. They all have these little proprietary tools, right, that sound great, but really they're just people who understand how to capture and they're advertisers in the digital space. I've chosen this one. My biggest thing, my takeaway and the goal, I need to understand my reporting better this year because I could be spending $25,000 a year with this marketing company. And if I can't understand how much traffic they drove to me, then it's very difficult for me to start to get to something closer to an ROI, return on investment, or as my lovely marketing girlfriend, who I don't bother her with my marketing needs, says ROAS, return on ad spend, and really helping myself understand those numbers both so I can repeat the things that are doing well for us, but also I can manage my budget with that company and going, we've got to do something better. What do we need to do? Refresh our keywords? Do we need to refresh the content that we're putting out there? Like it's just so I can be active in that because I've very much been an observer of my marketing company and they've given me enough to continue to work with them. And I want to work with them next year. Again, I think they're great, and I need to understand my reporting better and be more involved in that process.
Sales process. You talked, or I asked you a question earlier, your sales process, and you revisited it. Were you refining it to, hire a salesperson or refining it for yourself? So I want to get into the sales process with you from
Yeah.
somebody reaches out to you from consult to they sign up. Take this wherever you want. Do you want to talk about how you've refined your sales process, or do you want to talk about your sales process, consultation to proposal, and what it looks like for Gorman Landscapes?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a really great question. I think these are the kind of things that once you've gotten over the fact that I'm in business, I'm a real business person. I don't have imposter syndrome anymore. That these are the kind of things you realize, oh, I've got to get into this. I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure out what I'm doing wrong and what I'm doing right. So we've virtually changed this every year, developed it every year. All right. I got to figure out what's working for me, what's working for my clients. For me, it's spending less time and resources getting from lead to sale. I think that's probably the goal for everybody. And I don't mean that you're cheating the client out of value. It's just that I mean it should take you a minute or two to automate an email response as opposed to spending 10 minutes typing out a bunch of copy, right? Just on that, right? You got to be respectful of your resources. But then the clients, they want a ton of value in that, right? The sales presentation you give them, this is what's impressing them. So for us, it's been finding a balance in there. And I did know intuitively in the past year and a half, and more so this year, that I think this is where a system can step in and help and be helpful in that sales process. For example, a well-designed system, not unlike the How to Hardscape software, that I'm very happy to currently be in the process of onboarding and kind of getting my data entered into that system. I think where it is, it can be a very robust value for the client. If you're pre-creating all these sales sheets, your marketing materials, everything that you'd ever want to present to a client that would take you hours to collect, for each individual client and pull it out of your file folders and all that stuff to have that together at a click of a button to be like, it's a proposal going out. I want my proposal to look excellent visually and the copy. Having that in a system that can just send, that's fantastic. That's where you meet bringing value for the client and yeah, harvesting back your time resources, right? It's your most valuable time. So we're very interested in just really making that the most a client could ever want so that when they get our, whether it's a proposal, whether it's an estimate, whether it's a consult or a quote, and I do determine all four of those things to be quite different for us, that they're looking at it and they're like, wow, he's given me so much and I'm not even a client yet.
We were talking and you asked, how does the system do an estimate versus a quote? And I thought, yeah, that's interesting because ours, you just go through and create a proposal there. What does your estimate do for you? What are you doing to create the estimate and what does it do in that sales process for you versus putting a proposal together and giving that off to the client?
Here's how I define those four things for me. An estimate is very much just an estimate of the approximate price of your project. To me, it means that I haven't received a ton of information from the client. We're very early in our journey. And it's really a way for me to start to vet the client and if they're looking to buy or if they're just looking to get pricing, any number of those things, right? It's really to qualify that client, right? And truth be told, I don't think any of us want to be spending 3 hours putting together a whole bunch of incredible documentation, throw everything that we have to offer a client at this client who doesn't have an intention to buy because that's a real, it's a very real thing that we come up against constantly. So an estimate to me is quite simple and very straightforward, and it doesn't give a client a huge amount of information, but it does let them know that if they want a fire pit and a patio and a retaining wall, they've got a range of whatever, 18 to $40,000. You know what I mean? For me, proposal is typically something that we've done after a consultation, meaning that we've had some very meaningful time with that client, which consultations are billable. I know that's something that you had asked previously in your literature there, but for us, we've developed a billable consultation model for a client who does identify that they want a lot of my time and they perceive value in that. We want to discuss products. We want to review some pictures of some layout. We want to figure out what our design tone is. We want to look at functionality and how the different products you offer can affect the space. And so I just really said, well, look, I've got to put a price on this. I want to spend this time with you. It can be via Zoom, it can be in person in your kitchen, it can be at a supplier or a vendor reviewing products on site. But so we have started to develop a billable consultation model on for clients that we feel want more than an estimate, right? And they, to be honest, they want more than a quote because they're not sure how to build their space. And so then we follow up that with a proposal, which should really contain most of their wishes and their desires that we've dealt with in a consultation, right? Proposed. We've got a range and a build. And then I think finally a quote is what I put out most often besides an estimate, which is a client who knows what they want. And even if they don't have intention to hire me, they're very clear. And they're like, hey, Trevor, we've got a 30-foot concrete block wall that we want built, 3 foot high. There's a set of stairs. We want a 100 square foot patio right here. These are the products we're interested. Can you give us a price? And I jump for joy and I'm just like, yes, because you know exactly what you want. That is the definition of a quote. I am giving you a specific price for a specific thing. So all those things we've just tried to put some definition on how I perceive them, what I feel the client really wants, and then tailor a product to them that I'm titling with these four different titles, estimate, consultation, proposal, and quote.
How do you determine somebody is a suitable client to or potential client to go out on a consultation for them?
It's tough. I think it changes all the time. We've just started, so I want to say very early in our sales process to ask the right questions. I think we're always just looking for keys to help people respond. It's not so much their answers, it's how we're feeling them out for how what they're willing to respond to you with can tell you a lot about their intention. So long story short, we ask them more questions. We ask them better questions. We ask them sometimes flat out, are you just interested in looking for price right now for budgeting this project in the future? Or do you have a timeline that's upcoming and could you share that with me for when you'd like this complete? Have you received other estimates from other contractors? If so, I don't really need to know who they are or what their price is, but what didn't you like about them and why are you having this conversation with me right now? Right? Maybe we have some value to offer that they missed, or maybe we don't. And you're just looking, I'm the second price. But either way, I harvest quite a bit of information. I think about their intention to buy and their intention to buy with me. So we're trying to get better at that because it can be very off-putting to a potential client if done in the wrong way. It can say to them, I'm not willing to spend any more time than I need to with you in order to get to a sale. And while ultimately, no, I don't think I need to put words in my own mouth. I mean, ultimately, you want to get to the sale. Everybody should want to get to the point of selling your product, bringing your product to market, right? But just being smart about the way you go with that and maybe shortening that pathway to really figure out what is the client wanting in that moment, in that time. That's the goal for us.
What has been the feedback on charging for consultations to the clients that get to that point where you let them know that it's going to be um, charged for the consultation? Have you purposely tried to provide kind of enough guidance or value before you get to, hey, we can do a consultation, but it's going to be X amount, so that they've already got something in terms of a little bit of value? Or what has been that feedback in terms of charging that?
How most of the market perceives it, how much, so if you use the word consultation and paid consultation, I think most of the market looks at that as going, oh, you're going to charge me for an estimate. Most of my peers out there, I engage with everybody who does what I do or associated with what I do. I encourage them to have beers and we talk and we hang out, right? They might be my competition, but even still, we're all talking about, but how I tried charging for estimates and it didn't work, right? I lost a lot of business. And so I sat back and realized, well, sure, I'm not charging for an estimate. So what value can I put inside what I'm charging for? And so that's where it kind of took a page out of like, if I was a landscape designer, if I was an architect, if I was someone who is going to just purely market my services to help you decide what your space should look and feel like and touch, all I have is the consultation because I don't build that. I'm a designer. I'm an interior designer. I'm saying this couch needs to go here. I'm saying this wall should be pink. And you should have flowers over here. So that is my product. So there go, why would I be afraid to bill my client for that service? And so the closer I could get as a landscape contractor to sort of set aside going, no, you don't get 4 hours of my expertise, my back and forth emails, my choosing products, my issuing 3 different revisions for this for free. I'm number one, I blessed. I'm not starving that much for the business that I can invest that amount of time with you for free. And number two, going, if I listen to everybody else, they're far undervaluing my contribution to this project before it even starts. And so that's where I just went, nope, consult is a different thing. It's not an estimate. And I just had to put some rules around what makes it different from an estimate. And, part of that for me was value of the project. I think there's at any project that's, probably getting over $25,000, there's a good opportunity that some details might take a while to sort out, and it might be a consultation. If the client is unsure of the products they're going to be using or how they should be used, I immediately start to, you know, give my perceived value to the client about this can take some time. We can show you. You can get your own feeling of what this should look like by the time we finish a consult. So yeah, I don't think a lot of people in the residential space, they're still viewing it as charging for estimates, and they're wrong. I was wrong. You're never going to be able to charge for estimates in the trades industry. It just, you will lose a lot of leads. It's worked well for us. All I have to add is that we've had 5 clients last year who went through the consultation model. whose response was basically like, okay, 450 bucks gets me 4 hours of your time. You're telling me it's on camera in my home, this and that. We'll go for it. We'll bite. Every one of those projects gained in value by, I'm going to say, at least 30 to 40% driven by the client's desire to build their own budget, right? I didn't take them from a $25,000 estimate to an $80,000 install. They did. Because they saw what the increase in the design would cost them. Like, yes, we'll go for that. Talk more. And we'll go for that. We'll go for that. And so it really for us, we found like it, I guess I just quite simply say it seems to be working because the more you're giving that client the information and introduction into it's really their choice. I'm just an advisor on if it's going to work or not. That they will lead themselves to where they want to be.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Knowledge Tree Consulting. They are efficiency consultants in the industry with 35 plus years of industry experience building Oriole landscaping in Toronto, which they are completely hands off at this point. George and Peter have been on the podcast before, and George, on multiple occasions now, I've personally leaned on him to help with the How to Hardscape headquarters software and how we can maximize the efficiency of user experience. And I know the guys at DTE Landscaping, Chuck and Jeffrey, who we've also had on the show multiple times, have hired them on in the past. Check out their consulting services, peer groups, and events that are coming up on their website, knowledgetreeconsulting.com, or check them out on Instagram at joinktc. Now back to our episode. A horror story you've experienced in business. It doesn't have to be this business. It can be other businesses that you worked for that you experienced something, but this is more so to help those just starting out to understand what can happen in our industry and maybe put guardrails in place to prevent it from happening. But have you ever had a horror story from your time in business or working for others that you'd want to share?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've heard some of the funnest horror stories on your podcast. Like, it just, I think you should do like a bit of a like an AMA Ask Me Anything episode where it's just like contractor horror stories that you've already recorded because I think they're fantastic. Guys like me can relate to them, or it's just it hits us deep in our chest and go, no, no. So some pretty funny stuff out there. Honestly, we've been pretty lucky. I think I wouldn't call it a horror story, but something that I definitely learned. You know, we installed a big, beautiful back patio for a client. We used like a very ebony charcoal 2x2 hydro slab, which can be pretty pedestrian in a lot of settings, but the scale at which we did it, it was just huge, gorgeous, well-sloped patio in ebony and charcoal. Wow, looked great. Well, three stones in the middle had efflorescence. And he's like, what's this? I don't know if efflorescence is as big a problem out there for you guys that it is out
Oh yeah.
here.
Oh yeah.
So I just went, well, quite simply, it's efflorescence. This is the problem. We're in the middle of October. It's wet. These stones have been on the pallet wet. When it dries out, that's when we come by and we service it and we clean the efflorescence, remove it, and seal the stones. Like, no problem, sir. It's an easy problem for me to solve. It's just we're going to readdress it in spring. And he was like, no, I don't, just replace them now. And I'm like, well, it's a lot of work. It's in the middle of the pad. And like, I'd rather not. And again, here's some literature to let you know. No, I need you. I demand. And he started using very strong words. And so I don't often let my ego get in the way of these things, but I would, the more I'm like, oh, you demand. And so my chest is puffing up a little bit. Well, don't you say. So anyways, we came to a point where I just went, look, there's a really great, easy solution for me to service. I think I've provided all the value I can in confidence and literature. We're not going to replace those right now because professionally as a business, we got a really great solution for you in the spring. So, and he owed me, it's my first year of business. I think he owed me $1,800. I never collected that $1,800. And I look back and I go, not worth it for me at all. I should have just went, well, you know, it was the first year. I just sit with my accountant and go, so what are we calling this lost revenue? I'm like, I guess, because I can't go back to it. So we've been pretty lucky. I think the other side of things with equipment, where we are is literally cut out of the side of a mountain. So every project that I have to do, I mean, it's not unusual for me going into a backyard to have to figure out how to navigate like 18 steps or 3 flights of stairs to get into a backyard. So how do you get a bobcat or an excavator back there? We've had to preload boulder walls that are 4 feet high with 3 yards of gravel just to make a ramp to get in and out for 2 weeks, right? So there's never any soft ground. So we were crawling an excavator back into a backyard, and I thought I had everything worked out. And as we were going over top of a below ground window well, so builders have these exposed in order for people to have safe egress for fire. And I'm essentially driving a 4,000 pound excavator across a hole that's almost big enough for the excavator to fall. Just disaster. And I just felt something and everybody just stopped. And anyways, we got our way out of it. No disaster happened, but it's moments like those I'm going, I chomped at the bit a little too quickly, going, this has to happen. Like bull in a china shop, just go forward, just go. And that could have been pretty bad for my own personal safety. I mean, I was at the point where I was telling the crew, like, don't look at me, don't try to save me, don't try to grab the excavator, like just stay out of the way. So thankfully we haven't any huge disasters. But yeah, they're definitely out there for sure.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing those.
Yeah.
Anybody that you look to for inspiration, helpful, online, offline, doesn't matter. Anybody that's helped you along the way that you'd want to give a shout out here on the podcast.
Well, honestly, this marketing company, Reach Local, they've been my first introduction into this. So I would encourage anybody to work with them, capable, and they're great. You can follow them on Instagram. Honestly, Houston Landscapes, they've changed a lot. Like there was the owner ship group was different when I worked for them, and I do know the gentleman, Jeremy, who owns it right now, and they were my biggest inspiration in going, this is the vision for what I'd like to build off what my company looks like. And I think this goes for every young business person, and you can probably understand it. Like my accountants at Koshar and Co., based in Kelowna, British Columbia. It just happens to be that the owner, Becky Koshar, has been my best friend from kindergarten. And it also just happens to be that he's developed a very substantial business presence up in Kelowna, and his company can service mine. But like, I would be dead in the water as a business without a good accounting firm to back up everything that I'm doing out there and to keep me on the straight and narrow.
Which brings me to something that you're struggling with right now in your business, Trevor. However you want to take that.
Well, it didn't take me long to think about it, but I think I don't know if I'm struggling with it, but it's certainly what occupies my brain most of the days is the strategy that we're going to go forward with this year and beyond to grow and scale. I never wanted to get into this business to stay into the field. I did want to. For me, growth looked like and scaling looked like get me to a point where I'm running the business, I'm working on the business, not in the business. And so right now, we are looking at increasing our presence of working with subcontractors for select things. I think you have some very standard growth models in the landscape installation business is that basically get yourself a good foreman, get yourself a decent lead hand, and get them some laborers and build out that crew. And once that crew is able to handle volume, guess what? Start another crew, put those same things in place. Foreman, lead hand, some good laborers, right? So that's the traditional model, and I think we're going to try this year to move a little more towards a subcontract model because as few of the things we touched on before, the things I like is sales. The things I like is building the systems. The things I like is customer engagement, and I think we're a hop, skip, and a jump away from being able to bring in-house design in a very real way to what we offer. And so all of those things are non-field, but I think it builds the most value in my business. And so now I just want to find great young landscapers who are excited to build walls, who are excited to build patios, who are willing to, go through the training in their own companies and kind of meet the expectations that Gorman Landscapes has. So figuring out scaling, that's our biggest challenge right now. How do we scale? Because I'm 48 and I really don't want to be humping around concrete. Well, better word for the podcast. I really don't want to be moving concrete block and pavers or even be in cold, wet boots when by the time I'm 52 to 55 years old.
Got it.
So That's our biggest challenge right now, growth and scaling.
And then final question that I ask every hardscape business owner that comes on the show. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning? This could be business related, personal related, however you want to take that.
When you asked me to be on this podcast, I remember vice versa. Maybe I was saying to you, I'm like, what about some people who are in their first few years of business and I use this line that I think I might have more to offer somebody perhaps who's just starting out their landscape business than someone like Warren Buffett because he's just so far beyond the decision making that he's making, albeit maybe something we could aspire to, doesn't really have a lot to do with what you need now today to figure out if you're a sole proprietorship or a corporation, right? Those little things. So my number one thing I would say is develop a business plan or find someone with experience in developing plans to help you. I've sort of learned on the job to do that. And it's only now going into my fourth season that I think I'm putting something together that looks like a bit of a business plan. It was a huge, huge mistake for me. It would have given me direction. It would have given me a way to evaluate our performance as a company, a way to evaluate my performance as an owner. It would have given me a way to assess what risks I can take financially and what risks I can't take financially. So just so many things. So my number one thing, find someone or go to school, take a course in business if that's what you choose to do. I don't think you have to do that as a business owner. I think there's a lot of companies that you can bring in to help you establish based off your goals a good business plan.
Trevor, thank you so much for your time today. I knew we were going to go over on time just from our previous conversations, so I'm sorry for
Because
eating
I've
up
got
that
such a
much.
gift for gab. Is that why?
You're an excellent talker and a great person to talk to. So you make my life easy as an interviewer here.
Yeah, you as well, Mike. It's great. Thank you for having me.
Where can our audience go to find out more about you, yourself, Gorman Landscapes, anywhere you want to send them to?
Yeah, you can find us on all social media, Instagram and Facebook at Gorman Landscapes. You're also going to find us at www.gormanlandscapes.com on a website that we've been working on.
Awesome. Trevor, thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. Check out Trevor at Gorman Landscapes on Instagram. And while you're on your phone, give this podcast a 5-star rating if you could on Spotify or Apple. If you found some value in this podcast, that really helps us here. And before we leave you, we want to say thank you to our sponsors. Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know how to hardscape send you for money off their services there. And Knowledge Tree Consulting, if you're looking for efficiency consultants who have a lot of experience in our industry, check out Knowledge Tree Consulting at knowledgetreeconsulting.com. And thank you to Mosier for jumping on board to sponsor the How to Hardscape podcast. I just got my hands on a Mosier 2 Pro and I'll be using it to measure, draw, calculate areas, perimeters, volume, elevations, and lay out the entire project on my device and for estimating and design process. If you want to get your hands on a Mosier 2 Pro, use the promo code X8Hardscape. That's X, the number 8 Hardscape at Mosier.com, or simply click the link in the show notes. Now back to our episode. And once again, if you're looking for a software that How to Hardscape headquarters can help you streamline processes in your business, check it out at hthheadquarters.com. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.